Hello everybody, welcome to Technique Tuesday. Today we're going to be making this center pop out fun fold card. This is how it comes out of the envelope, and this is what it looks like when it stands up. It stands up like this so you can see how it looks from a head on or from an overhead view, and this is how it would look from head on. It's kind of reminiscent of the trifold shutter card, the floating centerfold card, and I think there was the pop-up book card. They're all kind of along the same lines. Actually, this one is the trifold shutter card, so you can see it's a little bit more detailed for this, the folding and the cutting. This one is the floating front card, so it's got kind of the same concept, but the floating piece was added extra, whereas this is part of the card. And then the other one is one of my very favorites. This is the book fold card. It's got the 2 points inside, but it's made to look like a little open book rather than just the little panel with the greeting on. But I'll link those other videos into the bottom of here, where, as you know, as always, I'll put the dimensions in the descriptions so you don't have to frantically write everything down as you follow along. So this is what the card looks like. The center pop out fun fold card, and it's using quite a few stamp sets today. Actually, I did the turtle and the raccoon from the new Zany Zoo and cut them out with the Zany Zoo dies. I did the big turtle from the Playing in the Rain and the Playing in the Rain dies, just because turtle and turtle, they look, you know, they kind of go together. And last but not least, this came from the same as the Zany Zoos. And then last but not least, the happy birthday on the front is from the Artistically Inked, and it's this, and it's just chopped in half. So I'll go through it quickly and show you how to do it. It really is very effective, I feel, and it's a great way of using pieces of 6x6 designer series paper. All the designer series paper right now is on sale, so if you fancy increasing your stash, now is the time to do it. And you can do that by going to my website and have a shopping spree. Why not? So here's the card. I'm going to bring in my paper scorer because there's quite a few cuts and scores that we need to do. So it uses a piece of 8.5 by 5.5 and not scored at 4 1/4 as usual. So we're going to score it at 2 1/8, and then we'll turn it over and score it at 2 1/8. So I'm just lining the edge of the cardstock up to 2 1/8 with the scoring blade. And then I'm going to stand up, so I might be a bit close to my camera and seem a little bit loud. So you've got a score line at 2 1/8 from each end, and then I'm going to line the edge of the paper, the longer edge of the paper, up at 1 1/4, and I'm going to score between the two score lines. And the good thing about the Stampin' Up paper trimmer is you can line up the line on the trimmer. You can see the score line because it's clear acrylic, and you can just press it in and score down until you get to the other score line. And then we'll turn it over and we'll line it again up at 1 1/4 and put the line of the cutting blade in where the first score mark is and cut down to the second score line. And then what we need to do is move the cutting blade out of the way, and then we need to line the short edge of the paper up at 3 1/4, and we're going to score between the two cut lines. So we start at this cut line and we're going to score down to this one while the paper is set at 3 1/4 on the paper measure. So score that down, and then we're going to turn it over and again line it up at 3 1/4, short side 3 1/4, and then we're going to take the scoring blade and score between the two cut lines. I think I can sit down now. And then because this is an 8.5 piece of cardstock, we need to score it somewhat in the middle. And as you know, that is at 4 1/4, but we're only going to score from the cut line up and from this cut line down. So again, we'll just pop the scoring blade in and go off the top, and then we'll come down to the bottom to the cut line and score. So here we have it. So we've got 2 score lines at 2 1/8. It's cut between those 2 score lines at the 1 1/4 mark, turned it round, and again cut between those 2 score lines, measured in 1 1/4 and cut down. And then we go back and we put the edge of the cardstock at 3 1/4 and score between the 2 cut lines. Edge of the cardstock at 3 1/4, cut between the 2 cut lines, and then we just score from the cut at 4 1/4. We score from the cut line up and off the edge, and from this cut line down and off the edge. So pop the paper cutter away for now because we don't need it for a while. So if we go ahead and fold these 2 1/8 pieces over, it's just a standard gatefold fold. Fits into a standard envelope, which of course is the nice thing, because now it's ended up being 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. It's just what goes on in here is where the magic happens. So you have to be a little bit careful, because you want to score on these 2 short lines in the middle panel, and then you want to score on the 2 scores on the top and the bottom, but you don't want to affect any of the other pieces. You only want to score where the lines indeed are. So we're going to go and we'll give everything a nice crease. Just leave them all flat while we do that. So now they've got a nice sharp crease with the bone folder. We can see how the paper is coming together. So that's all the folding done. Now we're going to cut some of the designer series paper. So back to the paper trimmer, and we're going to take a piece of 6 by 6 paper. This is out of the Bright and Beautifuls. It's so happy and cheerful. I love this one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to line it up at 5 3/8. So it's 1/8 under the 5 1/2, because we just want there to be a thin border, and we're going to cut that piece off. So we've made this 6 by 6 shorter at 5 3/8, but this 6 we're going to cut at equal 2-inch pieces. So we're going to line it up at 2 and cut it, line it up at 2 and cut it, and then by the magic of simple mathematics, we know that 3 2s make 6. Ta-da! So I'm going to keep these two pieces because I want the pattern to match when they go outwards. They're going to go on the front. Where's the sample? I'm actually using circles instead of stars, but it's nice if the patterns all match up. So you just need to keep 2 that were side by side. We could use that one. I just think this has got a little bit more of a definition of being a continuation of a circle. So these are the 2 pieces that we're going to put on the front. And this piece is what we're going to put on these little inside flaps. So they're already 2 inches, which is what we need them to be. But we're going to cut them at 1 7/8. That's the... No, we're not. I'm completely lying. 1 1/8. So we line it up at 1 1/8 on the paper trimmer and cut 1. Line it up at 1 1/8. 2. Line it up at 1 1/8. 3. Last but not least, 1 1/8. This is just a little spare piece that you can use for a different project. What I then did was I took another piece of designer series paper and did exactly the same thing, cutting it into 5 3/8, but then into 2-inch pieces. So that's going to go on the inside together with these lovely circles. I'm just trying to leave them in a row so it makes a little bit of sense. Actually, I think we'll go ahead and stick all the designer series paper on before we get to doing any of the other stamping, so we don't lose the flow of where we are. So these two pieces are the ones that are going to go on the front. So I'm just going to put some rolling adhesive on, making sure we keep them in the same pattern. And then they can go on the front. There's not very much of a border around because we only left an 1/8. And then just to make sure that the pattern is the same before we commit it and stick it down. So that's the front. Then we're going to open it up. And we've got the pieces that match. These are a little bit further apart, so it's not so evident that they're the same. But sometimes you can really tell with a pattern, and it's nice to have them have a continuity. So we'll turn this one over. Whoops. And stick that one down. Again, there's not much of a border. And then we'll flip that one over. And stick that one down. And then these little pieces, although again they're far apart, there's no sideways continuity, but there is top to bottom. So I thought I would just stick them on like that. So there's one. Again, not quite so evident any continuity with big round blobs, but sometimes if it's a stripe or it's a swirl or something, or flowers, you can sometimes tell. So why not put the effort in and make it look like you've tried? So there we go. So that's all the designer series paper attached, and now we can get on to do a little bit of stamping. First bit of stamping I'm going to do is stamp the happy birthday onto a piece of basic white cardstock, and it can be any size really. These were just pieces that I had in my lovely scrap box. So I'm going to use the Azure Afternoon just because it's a nice bright and cheerful colour. Stamp it onto the piece, and then I have a piece of the lime, which is cut just 1/4 of an inch bigger. So I'm going to just trim those off with my snips, and then stick them on. Doesn't matter if it's backwards because we're going to cut them and pop them onto the front. Oops. So there we have it. We're just going to snip between those two. And then snip there so they've got the little border around. Get rid of the little bits of scraps. And then we can pop this onto the front of the card so it's all set and ready. So happy birthday on the front, so when your lucky recipient takes it out of the envelope, this is what they see. I realised it with the first one I did was just plain. I thought, oh, it would be nice to have some kind of clue as to what they can expect on the inside. So that's the happy birthday for my artistically inked. So we'll just peel it off the acrylic block, pop it back in the box, and that's done its little job. And then the next thing was to stamp the turtle. So I'm just going to use the Memento black, and I just have a 1/4 sheet of basic white cardstock. We'll go ahead and stamp this friendly little fella. And again, it just peels off and goes back into the box and tucks away. And then the next thing is to stamp the other little turtle from the Zany Zoos. So we stamp him just in Memento black on a piece of basic white cardstock. Oops. And then the other one is to stamp the raccoon, again just in basic black. So this one's a little bit of a bigger stamp, and I sometimes like to lay the stamp flat and put the ink onto it so I can make sure that there is ink everywhere. And ta-da, there we go. So they're all stamped and looking good. And then what we need to do is, well, put the cover on the ink so I don't stick my elbow in it, is the first something. And then I know I've shown you quite a few times, and actually the videos that will be referenced in the bottom, they will have the colouring of all these lovely little critters. So again, by the power of Blue Peter and YouTube and all those good things, here are these guys coloured with the Stampin' blends. And my camera seems to have gone a little bit off kilter. Coloured with the Stampin' blends of all these lovely different colours, and then using the dies, I rolled them through the die cutting machine, and this is what we've ended up with. So the last little bit of stamping we need to do is for the panel in the middle. This is 1 7/8 by 2 7/8, and then I'm going to take the Azure Afternoon, and I'm going to get the birthday greeting out of the Zany Zoos. Oops, a nice edge, and stamp it up in the top corner. So that's that stamped, and then we can pop all these guys on with some dimensionals. So we'll attach the panel to the front. If you are using a dark piece of cardstock here, if you're using a really dark colour, I would recommend that perhaps you put another piece on the back for signing, because you wouldn't be able to see where the colours were. So what we need to do now is just pop some dimensionals onto these guys. I've got a combination of big ones and small ones. So we'll put 2 or 3 big ones on this turtle because he's quite large. A couple on the little guy. And then we'll put 2 on the raccoon. Oops, 2 on the raccoon's body. But because there's room, I wanted the balloons to sort of overhang. So I'm just going to put 2 of the small ones. You can, of course, cut a big one in half, or you can use the edges. But I'm just going to pop a small one on the edge of the 2 balloons that would be clinging, desperately clinging on for dear life. Don't lose me. So here we go. So we'll peel the backing papers off quickly and pop this little chap over here. We'll put the slightly bigger guy, although he's turtle and turtle themed, and he can go over this side with his cute little flower. And the first sample's got the stars, which are pretty celebratory, and I quite like these circles because they're reminiscent of balloons. And then of course what I did was I picked the colours out of these circles to use the Stampin' blends to do that with. So I'm just going to put him on a slight slant, and the dimensionals will be there. So when you look in the back, you can't actually see them, but you know they're there lifting him up. And then last but not least, because this little guy is singing his little heart out, I thought I would go back and bring in, oops, the music notes and just stamp those directly on to the designer series paper, so it looks like he's singing a little happy birthday to you song. That one doesn't want to come off quite so readily, so we'll leave it be. I'm not going to wrestle with a stamp. And there you have it. So it's really quite easy to do. The measurements, like I say, as always, will be in the bottom. And this is how it comes out of the envelope. Here's the one that was the stars. They both look the same on the inside. If you like what you've seen, please consider subscribing. If you ring the bell, you'll get a notification when I've posted a video. I like likes. That keeps my algorithm up and helps me keep bringing videos like this to you. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me or put them in the comment box below. Comments are appreciated. Anything that keeps me to the fore, I greatly appreciate it. I really appreciate you. And last but not least, thanks so much for watching.